On the morning of October 6, 1973, while the enemy bathed in the illusion of superiority, the first explosion shattered the silence on the battlefield. It wasn't just another battle, it was a declaration. We have returned. We will not forget. 6 years had passed since the devastating defeat of 1967. Sinai, the Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem were lost. Arab morale was broken, but beneath the surface a storm was brewing. In Cairo and Damascus, quiet plans were forming. The countdown to redemption had begun. And then at precisely 14 swag hours, when the sun blazed high overhead and the fate of nations hung in the balance, the Great Crossing began. Waves of Egyptian soldiers surged across the Suez Canal, shattering the illusion of invincibility that had shielded the hated Zionists for far too long. The Bar-Lev line, a labyrinth of defensive works and a testament to Zionist hubris, was crushed like a paper fortress. Within minutes, fire consumed the sands and smoke darkened the skies over the canal. At the same moment, a force of Syrian soldiers under the command of the legendary General Mustafa Tlas stormed the Golan Heights. The Syrians attacked with unmatched ferocity, their determination burning bright. As they advanced, they left behind a trail of fire and destruction, tearing into the very heart of the Zionist defenses. In the bunkers of Tel Aviv, panic spread through the Israeli leadership like a wildfire. No contingency plan could stop this Arab tide. Intelligence had failed. Even Prime Minister Golda Meir, the Iron Lady of Israel, broke down in tears. For the first time in their history, the Israelis were fighting for survival on two collapsing fronts. Across the region, the shock waves of the October War reverberated, sending ripples of surprise and disbelief across the world. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, found itself scrambling to respond. The Arab nations, galvanized by the initial success, watched with bated breath. It was as if the entire Middle East had been caught off guard, unable to fully comprehend the audacity of the attacks. But as the dust settled on the first day of the war, one thing became abundantly clear. The Arabs had struck a fatal blow to the Zionist psyche. The myth of Israeli invincibility had been shattered, leaving in its wake a profound sense of uncertainty and fear. The second day of the war dawned, bringing with it a harsh reality for Israel. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a growing sense of desperation. The Arab armies, flushed with the victories of the previous day, pressed their advantage, driving deeper into Israeli territory. But it was on the second day that the United States, jolted into action, unveiled its response. The world watched as America, true to its commitment to Israel, mounted a daring and massive airlift known as Operation Nickel Grass. Within hours, the skies over the region were filled with American aircraft, each bearing vital supplies that could turn the tide of the battle. Amidst the chaos, the Israelis regrouped, their backs against the wall, determined to resist. They launched fierce counterattacks, trying desperately to halt the Arab advance. The fighting intensified, turning the battlefields into scenes of fierce struggle and unimaginable loss. As the war raged on, the world held its breath. The superpowers entered the fray, pulling strings from behind the scenes. The Arab nations, energized by the early successes, demanded an immediate ceasefire, one that would solidify their gains and serve as a bulwark against further Israeli aggression. The United States, deeply committed to Israel's security, pushed for a truce that would allow Israel to regroup without losing face. Caught between these two powerful forces, Israel found itself at a critical juncture. The international pressure was immense. The Arab nations, emboldened by their military victories, demanded nothing less than complete victory. But Israel, backed by the United States, refused to accept a ceasefire that would solidify Arab gains on its soil. As the stalemate continued, the world watched anxiously. Each day brought new demands, new threats, and new diplomatic overtures. The stage was set for a prolonged conflict, one that threatened to engulf the region in an abyss of violence and hatred. Meanwhile, deep within the battlefields of the Sinai, the fighting was reaching a fever pitch. The Israelis, under immense pressure from both domestic and international fronts, were forced to take drastic measures. They launched a desperate push into the Suez, aiming to sever the Egyptian advance. The operation, known as the Battle of the Gap, was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the war. The Israelis, driven by a mix of desperation and determination, pushed deep into the Suez Canal zone. The Egyptians, dug in and well fortified, stood firm. In the end, the battle was a costly affair. Lives were lost on both sides, casualties that only added to the mounting toll of a senseless war. But perhaps more importantly, the battle marked a shift in the war. It showed that despite their early successes, the Arabs were unlikely to achieve a total victory. Yet even as the fighting continued, the moral victory had already been won. The Arabs had proven that the Israelis were not invincible. The shockwaves of this realization resonated far beyond the battlefields of the Sinai. The Arab nations, buoyed by this newfound belief, intensified their demands. A ceasefire, they argued, was no longer enough. They wanted a peace agreement that would address the root causes of the conflict, a peace that would bring about a lasting solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict. As the war dragged on, the world watched with bated breath. The stage was set for a final showdown, one that would determine not only the immediate outcome of the war, but perhaps the future of the entire region. Then came the fateful day when the fighting finally ceased. A ceasefire, fragile yet effective, was established, bringing an end to the most intense period of the war. The guns fell silent, but the echoes of the battle still rang in the ears of everyone involved. When the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded into memory, the world began to assess the cost of this monumental clash. The Arab nations, despite their earlier victories, realized that total victory was elusive. The Israelis, battered but unbroken, understood the gravity of their losses. The war had taken a heavy toll on both sides. Lives were lost, territories were contested, and the scars of the battle ran deep. But perhaps most significantly, the psychological impact was immeasurable. The Arabs had managed to shatter the image of Israeli invincibility that had loomed large over the region for decades. This realization sent shockwaves throughout the Arab world. It was as if a heavy chain had been broken, freeing the Arabs from the shackles of fear that had long imprisoned them. In the aftermath of the war, Arab voices echoed with a newfound confidence. They had stared into the abyss of Israeli power and emerged with heads held high. They had proven to themselves that they could stand toe-to-toe with Israel, and more importantly, they could fight back. The war had been a baptism of fire, a baptism that cleansed away years of subjugation and humiliation. It was as if the Arabs had rediscovered a lost strength, a strength born out of necessity and tempered in the fires of adversity. As the region grappled with the implications of this monumental clash, one thing became abundantly clear. The war had been about much more than just land and resources. It had been a struggle for dignity, a fight to reclaim honor and a testament to the enduring spirit of a people. The October War had ended, but its impact was set to reverberate through the annals of history. It was a war that had redefined courage, tested the limits of human endurance, and above all, shattered the myth of invincibility, proving that even giants can fall. Despite the immense suffering, the immeasurable loss, and the deep scars that the war left behind, there was a sense of liberation in the air. The Arabs had reclaimed a piece of their lost honor, and in doing so, had laid the foundation for a new chapter in their history. They had shown the world that they would not be intimidated, that they would stand up for their rights, and that they would fight for their place in the sun. As the sun set over the battlefields of the October War, it cast long shadows that stretched far into the future. The war might have ended, but its legacy was set to endure, serving as a reminder that true strength lies not in military might, but in the indomitable spirit of a people who refuse to be subdued.